Good afternoon. My name is Jim Conlan and welcome to the latest episode of our sports show. As you know, in part 3 of our sports show, it's all about football. And this week, it's the penultimate week in terms of the Champions League semi-finals. We're at the semi-final stage of the Champions League, and we have two mouth-watering clashes up ahead to talk about in terms of English football. And here in Ireland, we're great followers of the English football, the Premier League. Man City will go against the supremes of European football in terms of Real Madrid, the current holders, and former Premier League manager himself, one of the greatest of all time, in Carlo Ancelotti. And the other game will be a Milan derby, the first time in many a years that the two Milan clubs will have clashed in the Champions League in terms of the semi-final stages. They might have met in the past, but it's a long time, both with great history. Milan, terrific history throughout the 90s in terms of Champions League success, but the most recent success for the city of Milan came from the blue side of Inter Milan under Jose Mourinho, who were the last Milan side to win the Champions League. Joining us this evening to discuss those two semi-finals in depth, we have a former player who played at the highest level of European football. He played in the Champions League for 3 clubs. He played for the fearsome and the notorious renowned Ajax Amsterdam side, and then he went on to play with Juventus, one of the great Juventus teams of back in the late 90s, early 2000s, and then Borussia Dortmund as well, who featured many years in the Champions League. He's played in the World Cup numerous times for Nigeria. One of his crowning moments, the famous goal against Spain. He's also been voted African Footballer of the Year and is a former manager of the Nigerian international team, the Super Eagles themselves, the one and only Sunday Oliseh. Sunday, thanks for joining us today. And Champions League semi-finals, you played at the highest stage of the Champions League with some big clubs. When it comes to the business end of the Champions League, in terms of this, do you notice as a player maybe that the big clubs, the big players, they go into overdrive in terms of this part of the season?
Well, there's tendency for some clubs to go into that, but we've seen lately with Guardiola that in these modern times, it's kind of like as if it's the coaches that go into overdrive. We saw what Guardiola did in the finals, how the last time they got there and lost it out to Chelsea. It's the most important competition at the club level in world soccer. It's the most lucrative one. And at the same time, it's one that people call more difficult to win, than any other continental title because of the quality of the players that played from the beginning till the end.
And Sunday, we're going to talk first of all about the Italian all affair, the Milan derby. And just recently, I spoke to another soccer football correspondent. We had this discussion about Italian football. And if you look at Italian football now at present, it's probably the nearest it's been in terms of the glory days of the late 90s, the 2000s. We also have Roma and Juventus both in the Europa League semi-finals. Napoli obviously got to the quarter-finals as well. So that's 5 of the top Italian teams at the business end of European football. Lazio going very well in Serie A as well. Atlanta as well going very well in terms of that. So one could argue maybe aside from the Premier League that maybe this year Italian football has fared much better than its counterparts in Spain and Germany and France. And one could argue, I know the money ain't there at the moment, but one could say that outside of the Premier League that maybe Italian football is the most competitive at the moment.
Well, it makes a lot of sense to look at it. It makes sense to look at it from that point of view, because I think what the Italians have had, that this main problem they've had is that in the past, they dominated world football by their defensive network. Now, they were very, very solid defensively and preyed on the errors of the opposition. And then the moment they were able to break, they still stuck out there. They've passed this transition phase, where they're now trying to get not only to be defensive, but also to be creative and offensive. And that's where we come to these two teams, AC Milan and Inter Milan. What most people don't realize is that in Italy, Inter Milan is actually the most traditional team than AC Milan. In fact, in Italy, they don't call it Inter Milan, they call it Internazionale, because for them, that's how it's well known. And these are teams that are now fielding two coaches with two different philosophies, but they've been dominant to a large extent. And if, like you rightfully mentioned, when you see that they had to, AC Milan had to edge out another Italian team, Napoli, to get this far, that tells you that the Italian teams are doing something right, finally. They are more tactical now. They are more tactical offensively, I mean. Formerly, they were more tactical defensively, but now it's more tactical offensively. And if we take them team by team, let's look at AC Milan. We look at what Pioli is doing there. I mean, the coach, Francesco Pioli, what he's doing there. It's actually a team that is, it can be deceptive at times. One man might be able to read them very well, but they are very solid defensively. And in the pace that players like Leao bring into the team, I'm talking about Rafael Leao, the Portuguese player. When you look at the pace for a player that is 1.88 meters or something, I think, pace, strength, it makes players like Giroud excel. Now, we're looking at the, and we saw that AC Milan struggled in the league when this guy was injured or having struggles, but now they're back and they're in full fledged. So that makes us we should be careful and look at how AC Milan will play in the truth. I think they will come out in a very well organized way, like we should see them, we expect them to be, but also at the same time, they will not be waiting. I don't think they will be coming to try to dominate the game from the onset, because these are two teams that know each other very well. Let's not be deceived. It's a derby, but it's an European derby for them. So.
And Sunday, just in terms of Inter Milan, I just want to speak to you about one player. And obviously, he lit up the Euros beside Verratti in the middle of the park, Nicolo Barella. Nicolo Barella, he's a diminutive sort of player. He can play as an attacking midfielder. He can play in the hole. But once Barella is on form and once Barella is flying, he brings the Inter team on his shoulders at times in terms of what he's capable of. He's the one player that can produce bits of magic, while Martinez is probably a finisher and Dzeko's great hold-up play. It seems that for everything, when Inter are really flowing and really good, everything seems to go through Barella. He seems to be their go-to guy in terms he's elusive in terms of how you pick him up, how you mark him, how you stop him, because he plays in the pockets in between midfield and sort of attacking. Is he really the man that AC Milan really have to target the most? Is he really that danger point in terms of that Inter Milan team?
Well, you were spot on the way you've analyzed it. I can see you. In fact, he's one of the three musketeers that I see in this team, because he's like the transition from the defense line into the offense, and he does it amazingly well. He's very mobile, and that helps. But at the same time, Martinez is also a complementary. They are complementary to one another in the sense that Martinez is not a number 9, but it's more like a 9.5, and the movements he makes complements what Barella does. And then here comes the third musketeer, like I call them, and that is Lukaku. These three guys, and the way they play is like they don't only attack and fall back, they attack and also press high. And that's what Simon Inzaghi's philosophy, that's why I think that's what's gotten them this far, in the sense that the fact that they not only attack you, but they also press high, the strikers find themselves not running too much back and front, who keeps them fresh, and that's why they're dominant. But Barella is a player that I feel, if too much attention is given to him, Martinez will hurt you. If too much attention is given to Martinez, Barella will hurt you. If too much attention is given to them, Lukaku will break you. So it's kind of like, how are they? That's why I feel it's going to be a very, very interesting semi-final for us.
And Sunday, in terms of, before we talk a bit more about AC Milan, just in terms of Inter, obviously the two wing backs, the parading wing backs, DeMarco having a terrific season and Dumfries on the other wing. In terms of their outlet, they're constantly up and down the line, interplay with that sort of three. They depend on the two wing backs in terms of the supply. Obviously, Perisic did it before he went to Tottenham Hotspur. He's gone now. So DeMarco has really filled those sort of shoes that Perisic left. But Dumfries, obviously, on the other side gives that as well. So in terms of, these are the widths that Inter Milan provide in terms of their attacking. They're the supply line really in terms of DeMarco and Dumfries.
Now, when these three go up pressing, these three we spoke about earlier, the three musketeers, when they go up pressing up front, they don't do it wide. They do it via central areas. Now, the idea is to make the opposition forget the sides. And that's where these fullbacks come up. And like if you see when they come up, they don't wait always to the end before they bring out the pullouts. They sometimes give it what I call the hybrid pullouts. That means they're not really on the touchline before pulling out, in between. And that is what makes this team, that gives the team versatility. They are like unpredictable and highly complementary. I must give compliments to Simon Inzaghi, the coach, for what he's done, and they're doing well.
Yeah, and finally on Inter, before we get to AC Milan, I suppose Onana having a wonderful season in goals in terms of the keeper as well. But Bastoni as well, probably one of the best young defenders in European football as well. So in terms of Bastoni, and we all thought when Skriniar was going to leave in terms of Paris Saint-Germain, that would be a blow that Inter wouldn't be able to recover from. But in terms of Onana and Bastoni, they have the founding blocks there for the future, really.
Very true, very true. You must also realize that Onana is kind of like a redemption club for Onana. He's more than motivated to do well. He's extremely motivated to do well. He left Ajax after being suspended for some drug issues. For doping issues, not drugs, sorry, doping issues that it was mingled in, and he clearly explained that it was something that he used somehow. That notwithstanding, that kind of like propelled his exit from Ajax. So this is like a lifesaver for him, and he's taking it with both hands. He's done great. Getting this far is exceptional for the young man, and he also had a clash with the coach at the World Cup. That recently concluded World Cup. So this is kind of like a way for the man to redeem himself, and he's doing it greatly. And I'm really pleased for him.
And on to AC Milan then, obviously Mike Magon, obviously the new French goalkeeper, and people would say that he's probably putting his hand up now for being categorized probably in the top 3 goalkeepers in the world alongside Thibaut Courtois and Ederson of Man City. He's been in sensational form. He actually produced a world-class save against Ireland there only recently in the World Cup qualifiers from point blank. But he just seems to be unstoppable in terms of his shot-stopping ability.
Well, if you see, I think the environment suits him. The playing side suits him, and he's not a very noisy one, but he's at the same time also he's very, very sharp off his line, and the way he's been so consistent and very good at how he's handled it all, I think that has played a very huge role in giving the confidence to the defense line. I think, like you said, I am totally convinced that he has helped this team get this far.
Yeah.
And for that reason, he should be considered as one of the top 5 goalkeepers in the world at the moment.
Yeah, and Sunday, and we're looking further up the field with AC Milan, Tonali there in the middle of the park. He almost like a young Pirlo in terms of there's a sort of resemblance in terms of how he sort of plays the game. And obviously he's that anchorman, that linchpin that sort of provides the protection for the Leao and Giroud to express themselves.
Well, he does it exceptionally well. And then let's not forget that Giroud also is a player that drops in a lot to help the defense line. He's very smart. He knows that he's not probably the most gifted player when it comes playing up front. So he tries to compensate with the lacunes that he have going up front, playing up front by helping the team out as a team player. And that is why I feel that, like you rightfully analyzed, this mixture that they have between them and the way they are able to combine both of them with Leao, with Rafael, that is very explosive, technical, can hold on to the ball, enough for them to come up like we saw with the winning goal against Napoli. It's that's what makes AC Milan what it is. AC Milan is kind of like more defensively focused than Inter Milan, for sure. But that's why I feel we're going to see a spectacular game.
Yeah, and Sunday, before we ask for your prediction and we move on to the second game, if I look at this game, I could probably see this game go after the two legs. It mightn't be over. We could be looking at extra time come the end of the second leg. And I do start to feel there will be goals, but I do feel that maybe 180 minutes mightn't be enough. It might take extra time in the second leg to decide who gets through in this. In terms of you can make an argument that you could see 2-1-1 draws in terms of these sort of ties.
Well, the beautiful thing about football is that it's unpredictable. It's one of the only sports in the world you cannot really predict. Having said that, I still feel that this game, how it will go, depends on the first 20 minutes of each game. If one team scores in the first 20 minutes, it will change how they both handle the game. Because the beautiful thing about this game also is that nobody's going home, nobody's going away. They are both in the same stadium. It's your home, it's your away game. So it's kind of like okay, of course, where the fans will be standing with the shirt, and who gets to keep on the jersey, the home jersey, that's going to count. But it's still in the same stadium, still your dressing room, so it's going to be that. So for that reason, what I personally feel is that how this game starts. If there's a deadlock broken, especially just in the first 20 minutes, that would decide how the other team will play. I don't think any team would play for away or home, influence, no. So that is why this game is going to be difficult to predict it.
Yeah, and I suppose Sunday, who do you think might come through? If I had to push you in terms of who do you see maybe just sneaking it? Do you think that's the word, just sneaking through, that it won't be a decisive victory for either side?
Well, I cannot pinpoint a team that's going to get it, but one thing is going to be very, very certain. The team that dominates the midfield is going to win this game. The team that's able to dominate it, and dictate how the midfield is, the tempo it has, is going to win it, based on the offensive players that both teams are bringing on the line. Because defensively, they are both almost matched the same way. But what is going to happen is how the midfield dictates the pace. That's going to decide on this game.
Yeah, and Sunday, I'll bring you on now to the second game between Manchester City and Real Madrid, and probably the clash what people will rate in the modern time, the current era, the greatest, probably one of the greatest managers, Pep Guardiola. But if you're going back maybe last 30 or 40 years, no doubt probably back to the 90s to the current day in terms of most consistent, people would say Carlo Ancelotti, maybe himself and Marcello Lippi are probably the two greatest managers that football has probably seen in the last 30 or 40 years. So you have the big daddy in terms of Carlo Ancelotti coming up against the sort of the new modern era manager against Pep Guardiola. And if there's one manager that knows how to devise a game plan to maybe upset Haaland, upset Manchester City's threats, it's Carlo Ancelotti, because he's seen it all before. He's seen all these world-class players. He's come up against his sides in the past. So that's not going to frighten him. That's not going to haunt him, the weapons that Man City have.
Well, we cannot talk about these teams without talking about the managers. In fact, the four managers that we've seen at the semi-finals are top managers. Now, let's start with Carlo Ancelotti. Carlo Ancelotti is a coach that is totally opposite of Guardiola. He's a manager that, the way he handles it is that he plays in varied style. He doesn't believe in just tiki-taka. He doesn't believe in just defending. He mixes it up. And for that reason, he's able to adapt and use different kinds of players. He adapts to the players he has. And for that reason, that is why you see him varying, and that's why he's won four Champions League titles. So it's no joke to be able to do that. Whereas we're looking at, if we now go back to Guardiola, many people rate him as one of the best coaches in the world. But if you're going to be the best coach in the world at the club level, you have to have won the most prized title of the club level more than the others. And that Guardiola cannot claim to have. So it would be unfair to even try to push him ahead of Ancelotti, because Ancelotti has won not only so many national titles in everywhere he's worked, but he's also dominated the Champions League. But we are seeing a different Guardiola this season that we've not seen before. In the past, Guardiola was obsessed. In fact, to a large extent, he's still obsessed with dominating ball possession, dominating the tempo of the game, dominating the match, deciding how the match goes, scoring high goals. This season, we saw him now adapt, in the sense that we saw it first at the biggest magnitude when they played Arsenal. We are happy to let Arsenal have more of the ball, and they did the scoring. End result, they won the first game 1-3 at Arsenal in London. So, he's now, and that is, I believe that's one of the things that has cost him more Champions League in the past, because he did not only want to win Champions League matches, Champions League titles, but he wanted to win it playing in a special kind of way. Now, we saw it also recently, after having won the first leg of the quarterfinal against Bayern Munich. When they went to Munich, he was happy also to defend. They were also happy to, in phases, let Munich have the ball. And go on. So this is something that is like he's kind of like he's adapted his game in certain games now to be able to counter-attack. And that is also helped with the quality of the new point striker he has. In the past, he was always dabbling around with playing the half, the false number 9, like they say.
Yeah.
But now he's like, they have the point man, and we're now orienting our game to be able to make him playable. So I think these two managers are totally different, and on opposing. That's why it's going to be a fascinating game for us to watch.
And Sunday, when I look at maybe Manchester City, and I probably look at the sort of strengths that Manchester City have in wide players and up top and maybe defence, you could probably argue that probably they're a par for Real Madrid in terms of all they offer. But I just look at the Real Madrid, the engine room of Real Madrid, and you have the deep-lying playmaker in Toni Kroos, who I think is probably one of the most underrated players in world football. I've been to Classico 1 or 2 times, and I've seen him just dominate the games from in front to the back four. And then you have the advanced playmaker in Luka Modric. So Modric and Kroos, you have the deep-lying playmaker in Kroos, and you have the advanced lying playmaker in Modric as sort of such. And they always have the position to really dominate games in terms of that midfield room. Do Manchester City have the personnel there in terms of that real engine room? Is Rodri as good as what people say he is in terms of being able to combat Kroos and Modric? And how do you think Manchester City fare in that sort of there's no Fernandinho anymore there in terms of what he offered. So do you feel that maybe do they have the personnel to maybe neglect the influence of Modric and Kroos?
Well, I think they do. I think they do. But I will tell you why I think they do that. Because they now adapt their game to have 70% of their own philosophy and 30% to contain the opposition. Modric 2 years ago was not what people say he was, but now he's full-fledged. He's complete now. It's like as if he was growing in processes. And at the World Cup, we saw him play as a central defender when I was in Qatar. So it's so I think they will adapt their game in the midfield to be able to handle that. Now, the problem is not going to be just the midfield. The problem is going to be the attack line. Is Manchester City going to be able to contain Vinicius? Because people kind of like forget that he's probably one of the deadliest striker in the world at the moment. He's got pace. He's not gotten that total confidence from the club, the coach, and his teammates. And they kind of like sacrifice defensively to let him be fresh most of the times. So I think that will play a huge role also.
So you obviously think the battle of Kyle Walker up against sort of Vinicius will be a defining battle, and Walker will probably have to hold his ground instead of going forward from that full back position.
Well, if Kyle Walker plays, which is very likely, because I don't see anybody else being able to match Vinicius for pace in the defense line from Man City, like Kyle Walker can and is capable of. I think also not only Kyle Walker, because if you look at what Man City is doing now, they have not adapted their game to now play more a central back on the left side. So we've now seen, the Dutch Eka play on the left side. We saw also Akanji play on the left side against Arsenal. At the same time, they are now able to do it, and they become more solid, which gives the midfielders and the strikers more independence to go forward without thinking. So I think but I totally agree with you. It will be a big point to look at. How does Kyle Walker and Vinicius play? This is going to be a match in the match, I think.
And Sunday, people will probably look and say, oh, Haaland, what he's done in terms of goals, and that'll be Ancelotti's primary sort of focus. But for me, the best player in European football this year, the best player in the Premier League, probably the best player in club level in the world this year has been Kevin De Bruyne. He's been absolutely outstanding in terms of what he's produced. And really, he's the driving force. He's the main go-to guy for Man City at the moment. Is De Bruyne, is De Bruyne at his peak of his powers now in terms of what he's producing? Is he really up there as probably, you could argue, probably the best player in world football at the moment, given that Messi and Ronaldo are probably, their powers have waned and they're the other side of their careers? Could you make an argument now that Kevin De Bruyne is probably the leading light, although he hasn't done it for Belgium, but in terms of club football and in terms of Man City, is he the pound for pound the best player left in this Champions League?
I think he's arguably one of them, one of the best players in the Champions League for sure. But if I may add something to this analysis you give, because I do agree with the way what you've said, but you must also look at it from this angle. He has not done for Belgium what he's doing at Man City. There is a very clear reason for that. The reason is that for you to be a great passer of the ball, for you to give assists, you need runs. You don't need just runs, you need quality runs. You don't need just quality runs, you need timed runs ahead of you when you have the ball. And that is what Haaland presents to him nonstop. And for that reason, his game is just going. But De Bruyne is no longer 25 years old. He's no longer 30. So that means that even though Messi and Ronaldo are about dwindling, he's also looking at the last years of his career. So it's I think I agree with your reasoning.
Yeah. And Sunday, in terms of this game, obviously we're coming to the end of our time with you. In terms of how do you see this sort of going in terms of Real Madrid, Manchester City? Are we in for a high-scoring affair? Are we in for one of the classic encounters of the Champions League?
I think it's going to be very difficult for Real Madrid to beat Man City this time. Mostly based on what I told you earlier on. The Guardiola's mindset that is now adapted. Because he's kind of less predictable now. Because now the team is now, formerly you knew that they were going to come at you at all time. So now it's less predictable, and now they are now able to now hold on to results without risking. Formerly, the way they defended was by attacking. Now they defend by defending, and counter-attacking. So for that reason, I am kind of, unlike the first game, AC Milan, I am kind of like pinched to say that it's going to be a Man City win here, but I don't expect high scoring. I don't expect high scoring. With Ancelotti, it's difficult to dominate him high scoring like that.
And Sunday, the final sort of two questions for you, and they're quick fire questions now before I let you go. You've played Nigeria at the highest level. You've played so many countries in the world. Have you ever represented Nigeria against the Republic of Ireland? Have you ever played in your time against the Republic of Ireland in your career? And have you any memories of that?
Unfortunately not. Although I've met Irish players at the club level, but the national team, we didn't get that pleasure because I know that the Irish beef is one of the best. So it would have been great to go there and eat that. So.
And the last question, you probably mentioned this, you mentioned about club level. Have you ever come up against Roy Keane during your time in club level? Have you ever come across Roy Keane in terms of that?
Not really, because he was at Man United. I was at Ajax. He was at Man United. I was at Juventus and Dortmund. But we never really had to tussle out in the midfield. But I was looking forward to it so many times. I was praying because I used to like his duels with Vieira. So it would have been nice.
Would have been nice. Sunday, Oliseh, thanks for joining us today to give your expert opinions on the Champions League semi-finals. Obviously, you graced the Champions League at the highest stages with Juventus, Ajax, and Borussia Dortmund. You know what it sort of takes in terms of the business end. Obviously, you managed your country, Nigeria, former African Footballer of the Year, scored goals in the World Cup. We value your expert opinions. Enjoy the Champions League finals, and hopefully Sunday, this is not the last time we speak to you, and hopefully we can have a conversations in the future again.
Let's enjoy the semi-finals. Okay, and talk to you soon.
Talk to you Sunday. Take care.
Yeah, bye.